In May of 1995, the prototype for the Comanche reconnaissance attack helicopter was unveiled. Designed to undertake armed reconnaissance, ground attack, and air-to-air missions on the 21st century battlefield, the infinitely versatile Comanche is like no other previous aircraft. It is the first stealth helicopter to hit the skies. Poised to revolutionize modern warfare, the amazing Comanche is now being put through its paces by a team of America's most outstanding test pilots. The helicopter, a fantastic flying machine first imagined by Leonardo da Vinci and later made real by even more daring visionaries. It has become a dominating symbol of man's triumph over gravity. But more than merely an aircraft, the helicopter has changed the way we see our world and how we wage our battles to maintain freedom. In Vietnam, helicopters became a decisive factor in battlefield strategy. In later Mideast conflicts like Desert Storm, the helicopter provided a powerful offensive force against an increasingly mobile and elusive enemy. And now, the latest computerized design systems are creating a surge in helicopter innovations that will forever alter the way man flies. The Comanche reconnaissance attack helicopter is currently undergoing rigorous testing and development, with the goal of being fully operational by the year 2006. The program is right on schedule and under budget, thanks to the expertise of top-notch design engineers, flight technicians, and a team of 4 very dedicated test pilots.
Becoming a test pilot is actually easier than coming to terms with why you become a test pilot. Everything becomes routine after about 6 months. So the test pilot was a way, I thought, to see something new, see something different, and make a contribution.
I'm more of a detective type. I love technology. I love new things. I love to go and try out new things and see if I can find things that are wrong, that may be a mysterious problem that we can't figure out.
We're all type A people. We're all aggressive type people that pretty much know what we want. To work on a team, however, you have to listen to other people, and you have to be willing to compromise on some things.
I think one of the principal attributes of a test pilot is a curiosity. You have to want to know why something's doing what it's doing. I'm often asked by people I fly with, what does it take to be a test pilot? Can I be a test pilot, they'll say. And I ask them, what's the exact speed of the tips of your rotor right now? He won't answer, he doesn't know. Test pilots have to know those things. And in fact, people who want to be test pilots probably have already asked those questions. Helicopters are really fun to fly because they do everything. Helicopters go straight up and come straight down, fly backward and forward and sideward. You can fly at night, fly over water. Helicopters do things no other vehicle can do. Helicopters are supported by the rotary wings. In effect, the rotor blade is a wing, and because it spins around the mast, it has speed even when the vehicle is standing still. That means that the wing can develop lift while the vehicle is standing still and can fly.
An airplane generates its lift over a stationary wing, and the reason it does that is because it blows wind across the upper and lower surface, and it gets that wind by propelling itself through it.
Helicopters have several advantages over fixed wing, primarily in the fact that they can land and take off from virtually anywhere. Trying to find a place to land, a helicopter can come to a dead stop and then land. If you think about the fact that airliners, when they land, have another 2 miles to roll out and stop, it gives you an idea of the size of the landing space advantage that a helicopter has over its fixed-wing brothers. I think fixed-wing aircraft are nice. Everyone should have a chance to buy a ticket in one every now and then.
Fixed-wing aircraft are absolutely essential to the battlefield. There would be no way for helicopters to perform their job in a low-altitude world unless there were fighter coverage above to keep reasonable air superiority. As the helicopter evolved from a crude experimental flying machine to a high-tech strategic military weapon, Other versatile uses were evolving as well.
The helicopter in the Korean War, for example, was used to a great degree to extract wounded and to save their lives, which is a very noble cause. The helicopter was also used to move troops for the first time. It moved them well. And by Vietnam, whole battalions and brigades were being moved, along with their artillery and their support, by helicopters.
But when the helicopter was reconceived as a fully armed offensive aircraft, capable of taking action against an enemy, it brought about a new dawn of military strategy. Attack helicopters were really developed during the early Vietnam years, with the adaptation of weapons onto Hueys. From that, the Cobra was developed, which was actually the first specialized attack helicopter. Yet it would be another 20 years before computer technology would lead to the design of a helicopter that would fulfill the changing requirements of a modern battlefield. The Comanche Reconnaissance Attack Helicopter.
In a combat situation, a helicopter has a tremendous advantage. If you think about a helicopter as a vehicle like a tank or a truck, it could go over mountains or jump over rivers. So by being embedded in the nap of the earth, the helicopter is both protected and masked by the obstructions around it. Because a helicopter can do that, then the helicopter can control when it is detected, and therefore can help control the battlefield.
When a 20-millimeter cannon was fired from a Cobra helicopter, the pilot and crew could feel the powerful recoil as it disrupted the flight path. Even though it was designed to take that kind of brutal punishment, the Cobra still lacked a more important component: armor. It was dangerously vulnerable to the onslaught of enemy fire. To rectify this, in 1975, McDonnell Douglas created the Apache attack helicopter. Heavily armored and capable of carrying Hellfire anti-tank missiles, 70-millimeter rockets, and Sidewinder and Stinger air-to-air missiles. Though incredibly lethal and tough as a tank, the Apache now lacked the light maneuverability of the Cobra. It would be another 20 years before computer technology would lead to the design of a helicopter that would fulfill the requirements of the modern battlefield. The Comanche Reconnaissance Attack Helicopter. For the pilots who test the Comanche, this is where it all begins.
We're at Sikorsky's West Palm Beach Development Flight Test Center, which is a facility devoted to testing our helicopters. One of the reasons why the test facility is in Florida is because much of helicopter testing depends upon having low winds for very careful testing close to the ground. The sideward flight, for example, if the wind were gusting at 15 knots, you'd have great difficulty knowing what was gusty wind and what was airplane problem and separating the two.
But even though the winds are low, the stakes are always high.
Some of the risks a test pilot takes are much bigger than just personal injury. If you think about what a test pilot has in his hands is the life of the program. If you have a problem in a test aircraft, it could very well change the course of 1,000 people's jobs and of the development of a new system that has the potential perhaps to change the way warfare is.
Well, in the flight test program, all the pilots flying the Comanche are Naval Test Pilot School graduates, both military and contractor pilots. The Naval Test Pilot School does a good job at preparing you for the kinds of work that we do.
The only difference between the test pilot school and any other kind of graduate level work is that the other graduate level work generally doesn't kill you if you screw up.
One of the hardest things that I've had to learn to do is kiss him goodbye every morning when I know he's going out for a first flight like he did on Aircraft 2. I won't go out to work with him to see where he works because I don't want to know what it looks like.
Testing helicopters is probably much more dangerous than testing fixed-wing aircraft, mostly because a helicopter is in a difficult situation the minute it breaks the ground. The rotors are spinning very quickly, and any mishap that occurs that close to the ground will probably result in a catastrophe. So we test helicopters from the time we turn the rotors as if we're already in a critical flight situation.
Engine failures, electrical problems, and fires are some of the problems that Nick Lapos will face during test flights. These hard days still produce advances in technology.
Even the bad days are learning days if you do it right.
But testing isn't limited to actual flights. Simulators are used extensively to put the Comanche through theoretical high-risk situations. Engineers can then design high-risk test flights without sacrificing the safety of the pilot or sacrificing an expensive aircraft.
What's a typical test pilot? Well, it depends on his experience level. If he's an inexperienced test pilot, well, he's look for Tom Cruise. If he's got any time under his belt at all, look for Marvin Milquetoast.
The test pilots are probably the most safety conscious and minded people you're going to find in flying today, because they understand the harshness of their business, of their job. They understand the technical complexity of the aircraft that they're dealing with. They understand that flying has to be a skill rather than just a desire. You can never eliminate risk altogether. If we have an aircraft that we're taking to war, war is risky. So therefore, flying is a part of that, and it is also risky.
The more you do this kind of work, I think the more sobering it is, and the more you accept less risk elsewhere. My whole life now is mitigating risk. My whole life is to keep myself alive so that my wife isn't an insurance sweepstakes winner. I don't want that.
Successful bailout from a helicopter is problematic. That's an interesting phrase, problematic. Because the rotor is around you and above you, the only time you can really be sure that you'll get out well is if the rotor weren't there.
During the Vietnam War, the Army tried unsuccessfully to develop a helicopter pilot ejection system using carefully instrumented test dummies. It was determined to be highly dangerous and was soon abandoned.
If something goes wrong with the machine, it's going to be over fairly quickly. You probably don't have time to go through an ejection sequence.
As a result, helicopter pilots have never been able to depend on the extra security that an ejection system provides. But pilots flying the Comanche have come to depend on the machine itself and the complex, life-saving backup systems devised by the engineers and designers at Sikorsky.
In a test development program, you always want to have everything work properly without any surprises. But in a developmental program, that's not necessarily always the case.
Unexpected surprises are expected by design engineers who develop countermeasures to ensure the safety of pilot and aircraft.
There are a number of times since you're working with one-of-a-kind aircraft that things occur completely out of your control. That can be exciting, but that can also be heartbreaking.
To characterize a flight as being successful or not, the best way to say that is, are you surprised? If something happens in flight test that surprises you, that probably is an indication that things aren't going right, and that's an indication that something bad is about to happen.
While every precaution is exercised to anticipate and prevent something bad from occurring, test pilots are acutely aware that they are expected to respond quickly and decisively in any emergency situation. Their lives are on the line every time they fly. That's why test pilots must be highly educated individuals with instincts sharpened by years of experience. But it wasn't always that way.
Igor Sikorsky was his own test pilot, up until a time when the board of directors of his company realized that if you will, the crown jewels of the company were riding in that machine, and they asked him, please hire a pilot to be his test pilot. So the first helicopter test pilot for Sikorsky was Igor Sikorsky. The pilots who knew him said that he had unparalleled courage, the kind of courage to say to his wife at age 50, my dear, I would like us to mortgage the house, and let's start on a new enterprise. Let's build a helicopter.
The dangers of flying early helicopters soon became apparent to Sikorsky. In the quest to develop this aircraft and create a new breed of pilots to test them, there would be no turning back. Long before Desert Storm, it became apparent that the Apache, while tough as a tank, did not possess the armed reconnaissance capability needed on present and future battlefields. This led to development of an attack helicopter known as Comanche, with a covert reconnaissance capability known as Stealth.
Comanche is the first helicopter, the first attack helicopter, the first armed reconnaissance helicopter where we knew enough about the art and business of attack helicopters to do it right the first time.
The power of stealth cannot be underestimated.
So there's a great difficulty finding Comanche on the battlefield for a radar-controlled gun, which may be one of the worst threats of all. Comanche also is designed to very low acoustic signature. That is to say, the rotor blade noise is very low and of a different character than today's helicopters, therefore harder to find with electronic sensors that are being proliferated on the battlefield now. The control system of the Comanche, a fly-by-wire electric control system, gives a great deal of control to the pilot and takes away a lot of the problems that helicopters in the past have had.
Right now we're going through that portion of the Comanche development program that deals mainly with the structural envelope expansion. How fast, how high, how far, how quick.
One of the unique aspects of Comanche is the extreme power of its tail. The fan tail, which replaces the tail rotor of a conventional helicopter, is powerful enough so that a northbound Comanche traveling at 100 knots can be pointed east, west, or south while the aircraft still travels north, where we realized that the ability to quickly point weapons independent of the velocity of the aircraft was a very important attribute for winning in air combat battles. Now that attribute also gives the Comanche other advantages. The Comanche can be hovered and pointed and can shoot accurately. Comanche can do barrel rolls, loops, split S's, and the kinds of maneuvers that we usually associate with airplanes.
Comanche also needed to address some of the worst nightmares a test pilot can have.
Anytime that you take an aircraft and operate it within 50 feet of the ground at speeds from a hover to 60 or 70 miles an hour at night with night vision devices and no lights while somebody's shooting at you, okay, sooner or later you're going to hit a tree. The typical scenario is you strike a tail rotor into a tree, it severs the blade or damages the tail rotor blade, you lose control of the aircraft, it spins into the ground. If you're lucky, it crashes upright and there's no fires, and you get out and walk away and are just embarrassed. And of course, the worst case scenario is, and this has happened quite a bit, is that you lose control of the aircraft in such a way that it hits the ground inverted and kills the crew, or there's a post-crash fire. As a matter of fact, that was one of the reasons why in Comanche we have a ducted fan. The Army put the requirement on the contractor to develop this thing that would mitigate that risk.
As each new requirement was determined for the successful operation of Comanche, a solution was devised to make it possible.
The Comanche has 5 blades simply because that produces the amount of thrust we need to carry the equipment. Most current technology aircraft in the Army have 4 blades. Going to 5 blades provided an advantage in maneuverability. And it also, the blade design also allowed us to produce blades that will be a little quieter than the 4 blades on existing aircraft.
Helicopters can move in slowly, hide behind a mountain, and shoot. What Comanche brings is not just that, but the ability to do that under very, very difficult atmospheric conditions. Strong winds, for example, gusty air, where today's helicopters, the Cobra, for example, is very limited in its crosswind and downwind capability. The Comanche has virtually no wind limits.
Comanche's design anticipates air-to-air combat as never before.
The fact that we believe that in the future there will be some missions where the Comanche will be opposed by enemy helicopters. The counter-reconnaissance battle is going to be very important. We decided to build Comanche with the capabilities to win that battle. As a general rule, previous helicopters could not do aerobatic maneuvers. Comanche moves now to a new world. Comanche can be fully aerobatic.
But it's the stealth features of Comanche that make it downright intimidating.
This aircraft has been specifically designed both in its aerodynamic features but also in its composites to provide a low signature out on the battlefield so that we can take advantage of that capability and not be seen. The sound that the aircraft produces, a sound unlike anything else with the 5-bladed rotor system, but also with the fan tail, so that we make it much more difficult for anyone on the battlefield to distinguish that aircraft from others, but also hear it. You don't hear it until it's on top of you.
That doesn't mean Comanche will go unopposed.
The biggest threat is the handheld heat-seeking missile.
But the Comanche's unique hidden exhaust system totally defeats those capabilities. While evading enemy missiles is critical to the Comanche's very survival, Its first order of business is to act as a reconnaissance scout.
Finding the enemy is the most important single problem the commander has. A way of describing combat is hide and seek with deadly weapons.
Let's take a battlefield, and there are good guys and there are bad guys on it. The good guys are arrayed in some fashion that we probably all know about. If our system's working well, we know where the other good guys are because we talk to each other. What we don't know is what the bad guys are doing. And frequently, the way that they're deployed on the battlefield is a direct indication of what they're going to do next. We don't have a God's eye view. It's not a game. It's not a risk game where you can just see what's going on. You don't know. You just get the sense somebody tells you that something's out there, or you get some information, or a satellite picks up some troop buildup or movement or something like that. But it's far from enough information for a tactical commander to make a decision that involves his own soldiers' lives or the success on the battlefield.
When an Army pilot is flying a mission, he is considered a soldier first and an aviator second. Although the helicopter provides him with an agile platform from which he can seek out and pinpoint the enemy, he must also remain undetected in the process.
What we want to give him is the capability to go out and do his scouting mission, which literally has not changed since the days of the guys riding around on the horses. We want to give him a vehicle he can go out there, not be seen, get his information, and bring him home.
Outfitted with high-tech weaponry, the Comanche is now capable of exploring the full range of its operational agenda. And with this expanded potential, has come a controversial new concept: the digital battlefield.
What is the enemy doing? Where are they? The ground units call back and say, I've got contact over here. A helicopter reports I got movement on this side. All that confusing information comes back to the ground commander as a cacophony. Literally, what's going on? I have two different reports. Are they the same enemy unit from two different sensors? The digital battlefield is an attempt to straighten all that out by placing every contact on the battlefield specifically, to map it.
There's no such thing as a digital battlefield. What there is a real battlefield that you need to get information about, and that information is the digital part of it. People die on a real battlefield. Nobody ever died in front of a computer. But it is important. It is the information dominance. It is the information that you can gather from a battlefield, and having it is the difference between winning and losing a war, or the battle. Information dominance, if you know more than he thinks you do, then you are dominating the information battlefield. And Comanche is designed to do that.
Comanche does everything electronically. To a great degree, Comanche emails targets back from itself to the ground commander. Very much less human handling of the target information, very much less chance of mistakes. Comanche also has an aided target detection system, so the Comanche can expose itself to take the pictures and then hide back in the terrain and move while the crew looks at the pictures, names the targets for what they are, and sends that information back to the commander.
The Comanche is at the center of the communication grid, dispensing crucial information.
And we like to call it the quarterback of the battlefield because it does shuttle that information around, and it does act as that leader of the battle who's able to share that information with everybody and direct where we need to go and do things operationally.
These are capabilities of systems that simply don't exist today and will change the way the ground commander understands the battlefield.
But some situations require a more aggressive response from Comanche.
By the time Comanche came around, we realized that not only did we need to protect ourselves while we were out doing a reconnaissance mission, but sometimes when you do find something in the battlefield and you report it back, it would be convenient to be able to dispose of the target immediately without having to call in outside assets, artillery, TAC air, or other attack helicopters.
The Comanche carries 14 Hellfire anti-tank missiles and has the unique ability to fire them precisely. And when the chips are down and the Comanche is face to face with the enemy, it has yet another surprise in its pocket.
Personalized weapons delivery system. Here, I'm going to kill you, and here I'm going to deliver it right into your lap. I'm not going to hide 7,000 feet over your head where there's a risk that I'll not identify you properly. I'm going to get right in your shorts and I'm going to deliver the weapon system to you so that you won't even know what the hell happened. And by the way, you won't be able to see me when I do it. That's the difference.
If you find yourself in a fair fight, you didn't plan it properly.
Coming up, you will fly with our test pilots in the amazing Comanche helicopter. The Comanche is one of the world's most advanced helicopters. All its systems are designed for easy access. Integrated diagnostics can rapidly identify and isolate faults, allowing for quick removal and replacement.
Making sure everything is right before you fly sometimes is a lot more laborious process than you think it will be. We are pushing to get the airplane outside, probably shortly after lunch. I guess I'll just turn it over to Paul and let you go over the status of the aircraft.
Friday we worked on a tail landing gear with the installation of our instrumentation. We had a couple issues regarding that. That was resolved. Got to service our gear and we got to do our landing gear cycle checks finally.
Everything has to be right before you do a test flight, and patience is very important. It's very hard to keep that patience, especially when everyone, including the test team, wants to get back in the air.
We also got to do our mini functional on our flight control system.
That was so routine, it was amazing.
Good.
Yeah, the crew did a super job.
That's great.
Anytime that the aircraft is down, the flight test team is not happy that we're not flying.
And we got to defuel and weigh the aircraft also. So Friday was a very, very productive day and accomplishing some of our tasks based on our schedule.
The Comanche Combined Test Team brings in all the contractor people, all the Army, government, other agencies people together to bring that force as a team combined to develop this aircraft.
We've got a good shot at today going out for a ground run. I doubt if we'll fly, but we'll ground run. Like Dale said, sometime after lunch, my guess is it's going to be around 12:15. We're going to head outside.
A test helicopter is always outfitted with a large amount of additional equipment to monitor operational systems. On the Comanche, there are over 1,800 sensors that must be working, or the helicopter doesn't fly. That's far more than any operational aircraft has on board. With the potential of so many variables cropping up during the test flight, pilots spend their pre-flight time inspecting every inch of the Comanche. It's a ritual of absolute focus. Like an experienced cowboy looking over the bucking bronco he's about to ride, checking the condition, strength, and temperament of the animal before sliding into the saddle. Once airborne, the pilots in Comanche count on their intimate familiarity with the aircraft to govern split-second decisions. They will rely on technology, but they will fly by feel and instinct. But all testing doesn't happen in the air. Pilots spend countless hours in the aircraft on the ground, running checks on every system in Comanche to anticipate problems before they happen. In the end, much more time is spent by the pilots in these earthbound activities. Those few highly critical moments when they become airborne are icing on the cake. We have entered a new age of aviation design and testing. The old days of barnstorming pilots and seat-of-the-pants flying have now been replaced by computerized technology. And nowhere is that revolutionary technology better utilized than in the computer-generated design program for development and testing of the Comanche Reconnaissance Attack Helicopter. But there can always be surprises when you're exploring unknown territory.
Computer-generated design is only as good as the information that goes into it. And sometimes things aren't perfect.
This aircraft, due to its technical complexity, requires a great deal of testing. We are going into areas uncharted by any other aircraft previous to this.
Working a project like this, like Comanche, is exciting because you get to run the gamut. The first flight in one of these prototypes is as experimental as you can get. The reality is what we're doing is we're doing a structural envelope expansion and shakedown testing of Air Vehicle 1. We're making sure that all the parts stay on the helicopter when we want to fly it.
When we develop the test cards, we do the test planning and the test work so that we expand the envelope very slowly. We look at data After each flight, we ensure that the next step will be safe. Doing the testing takes discipline to go in a methodical, slow way. It would be easier, it would be more exciting to just go out and say, all right, this is our goal. We want to go to 3.5 Gs today. We think it'll do it, we're pretty sure. Let's just have at it. You have to go methodically out because making a mistake is too expensive.
Thanks to hundreds of dedicated men and women, the carefully modulated development of Comanche is on schedule and under budget.
There are a lot of people involved in getting a test flight off. Obviously, we have the mechanics who do a lot of work on the aircraft, also a lot of inspections, detailed inspections.
Each step of the maintenance process is conducted under the most rigorous supervision, with the greatest attention to detail. Cross-checks of the helicopter's internal systems are carried out on a regular schedule. Structural anomalies and design flaws are closely examined by flight engineers and technicians. All of this is done in preparation for testing that is monitored and controlled from this room.
This is one of 3 telemetry rooms that we have here at the facility. The room is tied into 2 mainframe computers. The data that we get from the aircraft comes into those computers. It is pre-processed and displayed on these screens and also on the strip charts in the room so that the engineers can look real time at data that is coming back from the aircraft.
And each piece of that information is instantly processed and analyzed in order to provide immediate and sometimes crucial decisions from flight test control.
Knock it off, which is the call that comes from TM, telemetry, if they see something that they don't like. Now, I can tell you that every time I've heard that, and we've heard it a couple times on this program, I didn't know anything was going on. So, if you're flying out there and you're doing a maneuver, particularly aggressive maneuver, and you hear, knock it off, that's your cue to get unaggressive, to get benign again. Whatever you were doing, stop doing it nice and gently, and you just kind of, and then, and only then, do you get the briefing on what it was that just happened. Okay, what I saw was the loads on the such and such rose to beyond the limits, and so then you kind of count your cards and go, now, did I just get lucky?
But luck is not a consideration for these skilled flight technicians. Every decision they make must be founded on experience, caution, and certainty to avoid unfortunate surprises.
Usually bad things happen very subtly for a long time, and it's kind of our job to catch them before they become something bad.
When you're all done and the engineer says, yeah, I called you off that point because I saw this, then you kind of do a whew, because what you did to get out of that point was correct and didn't aggravate the situation any.
Also, if there should be an emergency on the aircraft, we have enough data in this room that we can help the pilots troubleshoot that data. If it's not a critical situation, we will discuss it here in the room before we decide to stop it. But basically, anyone who's monitoring data, if they see something in their data that they don't understand, they can call the aircraft and say, knock it off, or stop that. We're approaching a limit, or I'm not happy with the way this is going.
Choosing the precise moment to notify a test pilot to knock it off can make the critical difference between success and failure, between life or death.
I think there are 2 kinds of scared. There is fright, which is like being startled, like a gun going off, and you jump, ooh, that's fright. Then there's fear. And fear is the thing, fear is like chronic fright, okay? And I'll explain that. That means if you're out over water and let's say one of your 2 engine fails, and it's very likely that the other one is, and you get an hour to think about it, you're afraid. You have fear. I was coming back one time from White Sands, New Mexico, back to Fort Rucker. We were coming back in an Apache. We were going to take advantage, see how long legs we could get. So we'd actually climbed the Apache up to an ungodly altitude of about 14,000 feet. No sooner we get up there and then we get an indication that we may have a fire with our shaft-driven compressor So there we are at 13,000 feet, and the only real safe course of action is to be on the ground walking away from the helicopter. And so the fear is when you think that you're about to come apart because of a fire, for the entire 10 or 15 minutes it takes you to spiral on down to the ground and get out. Only to find then it was a pressure line that had popped off and not a real fire, but that's probably the most afraid I've been. That was the one where, because a helicopter, we don't have ejection seats, we don't wear parachutes. So in a scenario like that, you're going to burn, or, well, you're going to burn to death. I mean, there's no, I guess you always have the option of jumping out, but it's a choice of whether you want to plummet to your death or burn to your death. So either way, it's not a rosy picture.
If you don't hear from them when you're supposed to hear from them, you worry. If they're supposed to be home by a certain time and they're not, you worry. If you page them and they don't call you right back, you worry. It's just something that you can't ever get used to it, but it's something that you just live with.
Because test pilots understand the complexity of the aircraft they're flying, every effort is made to reduce risk to its lowest possible level, minimizing the probability of something going wrong. But risk can never be completely eliminated.
Our job is crash rescue, fire suppression on the helicopters in case of any incidents, and rescue of the pilots.
Our first priority is to size up the situation and establish the incident command system and to establish a rescue path so the persons coming out of the aircraft have a safe walkway and we have a safe walkway walking up to the aircraft. The rescue tools that we have enable us to move heavy objects apart, say car doors or aircraft doors. It would help us gain access into the fuselage of an aircraft to make an opening bigger to rescue and trap people. And also if we needed to lift an aircraft, we can put it on the ground and actually lift up the aircraft to remove an entangled person.
Saving the pilot and plane in a drill on the ground is one thing. Everyone knows that they will have far less control if an emergency occurs. In the air, a second set of eyes will follow them for this very reason.
Anytime we send Comanche out, we always send a chase ship with it.
As the Comanche lifts off, it will be accompanied by other eyes that will monitor its safety and progress during every critical step of the upcoming test flight.
The chase ship is responsible for clearing the test aircraft. The two pilots inside the test aircraft are usually focused on doing specifically what that task is, and therefore can't spend a lot of time looking out the window watching for the general aviation enthusiast busting through the airspace unannounced. The test aircraft, Comanche in this case, won't make a turn without saying, "Chase, am I clear?" And the chase clears them, first and foremost. Second, it's always good to have somebody on the outside of your aircraft watching your aircraft. In the cockpit of the Comanche, I cannot see my tail or the fan or the underside of my aircraft. And so if we sense something in the cockpit, we can always bring the chase up close and he can look at the tail and say, "No, everything looks fine," or, "Oh yes, I see some smoke coming from the compartment that you can't see, pilot." It's just one more piece of information that the test pilot in the cockpit uses to determine his next course of action. Again, with the goal of riding in the car on the way home, after the day's over, and not in an ambulance.
After each flight is completed, the data is offloaded from the aircraft, and a huge amount of data is the result. It's like, putting an EKG on a patient to see if his heart's working right.
We have approximately 1,800 measurements of the strain gauges, accelerometers, temperatures, pressures, etc., that are measured, which is a lot higher than we have ever looked at before on other airplanes.
The next flight we'll conduct is an experiment on directional stability. What we're doing is installing a slat device on the back end of the aircraft. The purpose of the slat experiment is to evaluate a change that we would like to make, a more complicated change to the way the tail of the aircraft looks. It would be very difficult to do one time off without having some knowledge that it may or may not work.
During today's flight, the Comanche's pilots and the control room engineers will follow a test card, a scripted set of maneuvers which dictates the precise order, requirements, and strict limitations of every procedure.
The guy in the front seat flies the aircraft. He manipulates the controls. His responsibility is to fly the points without going over limits. The other pilot then he really controls the flight card, and he's the one that's really orchestrating things. The two stations have their equivalent as far as control capability. So if there's a failure of cockpit control in one seat, then the other seat can take over.
Today's test will cover a variety of maneuvers as pilots and engineers attempt to evaluate the most recent changes made to the Comanche.
Hey, if you guys concur, we'll bring the NR back to 100.
Yeah, I was just watching at 107 since we taxied out at 100 and it was okay, although we're reading about the same numbers we had before, so yeah, do you want to bring it back to 100 and get things cleaned up? Go ahead.
Okay, NR mid-range showing 170, going to 100.
Go to 100.
Tower chase to orbit while they taxi. Roger, copy.
100 confirmed.
And mobile, if you want to just remind Pete that we are going to do STU, shutdown, restart, evolution, before he hooks up external.
327, request a PFCS reset for the collective trim switch.
I got it.
Copy, man.
As the helicopter lifts off, there is a great sense of relief and accomplishment among the people who have worked for months to make this newly modified version of the Comanche a success.
Once it does leave the ground, it's a tremendous feeling of satisfaction that everything has finally come together and that you were finally able to get it into the air.
Started off at around 500.
Yeah, we were right at 500. 504, 487.
There, steadily increasing its going up in power, so let's bring it on back.
The flight test is abruptly suspended when engineers in the control room detect inappropriate data from the Comanche's onboard sensors. If a serious problem is found, months of painstaking preparation could be jeopardized. The pilots wait tensely for word in the Comanche. The key parameters from the main rotor, the fan, and the airframe are being closely monitored by the engineers in the control room to see whether they are approaching predetermined critical limits that would require the flight test to be immediately canceled.
If we're getting loads that are in excess of what we expect to see, we will terminate the test flight or call it back or terminate and go on to something else before we get to that point.
Here's what we're going to want to do. We're going to have to dial back parameter 211, the roll P-dot gain. We're going to roll that back down to 0, and then we'll go ahead and beep up the NR.
Roger that.
Up there's high input module. Take a record. You got high input module vibes there?
Yeah, the module vibes.
Okay, I'm going to reduce power. Okay.
Looks clean now.
With the problem corrected, the Comanche pilots continue with each precise step of the test.
That was nice work. Peak torque was only 80.
The Comanche's next maneuver is a standard forward acceleration.
Everything's good, go 120.
Both pilots on board the Comanche are fully rated and qualified to fly the aircraft in any potential situation. If there is a failure of cockpit control in one seat, then the second pilot can take over.
Okay, what do you want to do here? Go up to 107?
Yeah, let's work 107. We'll do the rest of the card at 107.
Ready for 107? I'm set. Okay, currently 100 going to 170 on the F2. And left turn, Chase.
While the turns being executed by the Comanche appear very routine and visually unexciting to the casual observer, to the pilots and engineers, these are actually critical basic maneuvers that indicate the aircraft's greater potential. How smoothly and precisely the turns are executed will signify just how successfully the experimental tail slat device is performed, and if it will continue to be utilized on Comanche as a flight design improvement or will be scrapped, forcing engineers back to square one.
Yeah, 130, clear to 140.
Let's do the 140 knot side slip points.
Okay, 140 knots, 107 NR, 0 to 10. Right and left side slip. Your direction is your choice. Okay. I'll keep up. These aren't going to be easy because the tail hasn't moved. So. Okay,
During the maintenance test, the pilot in the forward seat flies the aircraft, actually manipulating the controls, and it's his responsibility to fly each test point while attaining, not exceeding the imposed limits. To the edge, but not over.
Okay, everything looked good on that. Noticed you were keeping the power down while during the turn, which made sense. I would like to repeat the 45s and gradually pull power in, trying to maintain level flight. Trying to see whether it's airframe deflection or gearbox deflection.
This may again lead to some clues to what we got going on here.
Roger. Okay, about 140.
All right, those were certainly good ones with power. I can't really think of anything else I want to pick up on this card. I think we've accomplished our objectives within our input module problem, so why don't we come on home?
I think the testing on the Comanche program is going very well. The aircraft is meeting its performance expectations. We have reached higher maximum speed than we expected to reach in level flight, or I should say than was in our original proposal, so we are meeting all of the spec requirements of the aircraft.
Roger, just let you know we're taxiing to the line. That's it for us today.
Sir, I'll end your time now.
Completing a flight test without any serious problems is the goal of every pilot. But arriving back on the ground safely is only the first step. Hours of debriefing and data assessment will follow as the pilots and engineers attempt to interpret hundreds and hundreds of different measurements provided by the Comanche's onboard systems.
Yeah, we got some problems with high vibrations on our engine drive shaft. We've got new shafts installed, so we're probably going to have to balance them a little bit. Other than that, it went pretty well.
Weeks of preparation have led to only an hour and 20 minutes of flight time for Comanche. But many more months of evaluation will follow.
Okay, total, today's flight time was 1.3 hours.
One of the things that I try to do as a test pilot is always to keep in mind exactly why we're doing what we're doing. If you think that a test pilot has to have a certain degree of courage and audacity to do the job, imagine what it's like to take the aircraft on a night combat mission. The thing that we always keep in focus is that what we're doing is pretty easy compared to the job that the people who take it and put it to use will have to do.
Me and myself and like Nick Lapos, we've been doing this together for 15 years. There's almost a brotherhood, you know, there that everybody's looking out for each other, and you know, I won't do it unless all my brothers are right there, you know, watching.
Centuries after Leonardo da Vinci dreamed of vertical flight, Igor Ivan Sikorsky used science to meet the challenge, solve the problem, and make the dream a reality. He discovered that we do not fly by magic. We fly by science, and only science fueled by daring imagination can conquer the unknown. With technology on their side, today's test pilots continue to chase the dream.